So it's now about 4:45 because I've been working on some stuff with the NMR, and we're ready to take the acetanilide out of the desiccator and get a mass and continue with the bromination. And I cleaned up while you weren't looking. So we're going to pull that beaker. It's quite solid. And it looks like it's stabilizing at 10.835 grams with the beaker in solid. 10.835 grams. So you can get the mass of solid by difference. And the next thing we're going to do is measure out a gram of that, so we can transfer it to the flask that's sitting there with the acetic acid and 95% ethanol solution, and the 1.8 grams of sodium bromide as dissolved as it's going to be, and we're going to want to cool that in an ice bath. So I'm going to set that in the ice bath now and let it start coming to temperature while I weigh out the solid. And we still have our chlorine bleach solution, the 12 milliliters that I measured out earlier. So we'll have that ready to add. And we have our 50% ethanol ready for the recrystallization. So let's go and weigh out a gram of this solid. And we're going to use one of these weighing boats because that'll be a convenient size for that amount of solid and an easy way of transferring it into the Erlenmeyer. So we'll tare that. And we should need, if we got a decent yield, about 2/3 of this solid. And since it's so light, so low density, it's going to kind of fill that boat. So that's 0.6 grams so far, ish. So 0.9-ish, a little bit. Let's get the last little bit. Still a little sticky. Might still be very slightly wet. But it's been sitting in that desiccator for quite a while, so. At least be fairly dry. So that's 1.012 gram. That's close enough because I'll probably end up leaving about 12 milligrams behind as I try to transfer this anyway. So we'll take that over. This is going to be used for mass spec sample. And since I'm not going to run the mass spec today, I'm just going to return that to the desiccator. Put it back in that 50 milliliter beaker. Oops. And we can leave that in the desiccator until such time as I'm going to run the mass spec. I'm actually going to put it in a different desiccator. This one still has the cinnamic acid from the first semester lab sitting in it. Set that aside. So we're going to dissolve this acetanilide in the same solution as the sodium bromide. boat to scrape off the spatula and the spatula to scrape off the boat. And it was a little more than a gram, so I'm not worried about leaving just a trace. We'll get as much as we can out. So that should dissolve fairly readily in that mixture of 95% ethanol and acetic acid. And it's cooled at 0, or roughly 0 in our ice bath. And now we're just going to add this bleach solution fairly slowly. You'll notice it's going to actually generate a little bit of bromine, so you can see that it's slightly yellow in there, maybe. Assuming I've got this camera pointing at the right direction. The acetic acid is protonating the sodium hypochlorite to form HOCl, which then reacts to form HOBr and bromide, or in chloride rather. But there's always a little bit of bromine formed. So we're just trying to make sure that doesn't get too hot as we add the bleach. Now you see the color faded now that I've added all the bleach, as the bromide is converted to hypobromite, and the rest of that should dissolve, and that can just be rinsed out. I'm going to back off the stirring just a little bit, stir a little less vigorously, and we want to leave this for just a couple minutes at ice bath temperature, and then we're going to remove the ice bath and stir it for 15 minutes at room temperature while it warms to room temperature. And I think you can see that the sodium bromide has now pretty much dissolved because it's being converted to sodium hypobromite. And now we got enough water in there that the sodium chloride that's produced is soluble. So we'll just let that stir for a little bit. I'll put the bleach back. And while I was cleaning up, I also grabbed the sodium hydroxide and the sodium thiosulfate that we're going to need to quench the excess oxidizing agent. You notice there's a whole bunch of crusty sodium hydroxide there. I'm going to put gloves on when I work with that, because I don't want to dissolve my hand. So, you can rinse this guy out. If you want to know the truth, the original 50 ml Erlenmeyer that I had measured out the bleach solution in, I didn't have one of these little protective rings, and I knocked it over while I was cleaning up and broke it. So I had to go get another one. That little ring is designed so that when you knock this over, the glass doesn't hit the bench. But the one I was using before didn't have that protection. And there's still a chunk of glass in the sponge. And I'm just going to rinse the spatula to wipe that off. Tiny little bit of acetanilide. So that's long enough at 0. That's been more than a minute. Dispose of that ice bath. Now we're just going to let that stir, and it's almost exactly 5 o'clock, so at 5:15 we'll be ready to work that up. So I'll stop the video now and rejoin you when it's been 15 minutes.